Hey, everybody. Pete A. Turn, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show. We're waiting on Matthew to come in. He's overseas in Great Britain, and so maybe we're having some comms problems. We'll see. It could be that we postpone this show. But I thought I would talk to you in the meantime just to discuss some of his work. He's a historian. He's written books on, let's see, Beatrix Potter, the Queen, fill in the blank, all of them. He's written about a person he calls the first Iron Lady who worked with one of the queens, and just on and on and on. He's got a fantastic body of work, and I thought it'd be really interesting to get his take on the Queen because, look, there's always sensation around the Queen of England and Great Britain. There's tales, there's intrigue, she's almost 100 years old, so there's been a lot that we talk about with her. And it struck me interesting that when you think about royal people, there's a lot of royalty around the world, not just English, but many countries have royal families. But the one we seem to think about and talk about the most is the British royal family, and I wonder why that is. I'm curious to ask him that as well, and also just in general, all of this modern stuff with Harry and Meghan and their breakup with the family, or their distancing from the family and doing something else. And what does he make of that? Just in general, all of the interesting things. When you write a biography about someone who's done so much, because she's been around forever and has had a very important position in terms of world events. The Queen has worked with Winston Churchill, who's been dead for almost 50 years now. So we have all these interesting things to talk about. Hopefully we'll have him on here in a minute. In general, a couple things that are coming up. I'll be in Texas this week supporting the Celebrity Softball Classic, which is put on by Tim Klund. And Tim, we had the DOC, from NWA and rapping fame, had him on the show on Friday. If you're interested, you can go back and look on the YouTube side, and you can find that live show just a couple of shows ago. Moments ago, we posted a short from our episode with Chase Hughes, who's probably most notable from the behavior panel. He and I talked about body language. He's a former military guy, as I am, and we talked about collection and all those kind of things. There's a really cool, again, on YouTube, playlist called the Spy vs. Spy playlist. You can get that really simply by just typing in Spy vs. Spy and Break It Down show. It should come up. There's probably 60 some odd episodes in there just to give you an idea of the kind of work we do with that. Always interesting, always fun. When I go to Texas this week, I'm not really going to grab any shows, I don't think. You never know, though. There's always something. Well, here comes an airplane. There's always something interesting to talk to someone about. So who knows? Maybe I will grab a show. But there's a bunch of things that are coming up. John and I are going to be headed to Tennessee to grab a whole bunch of episodes. And we're planning that right now, trying to get guests lined up. Some pretty cool names are being talked about. And I'm going to make another trip out to Texas this summer to look at some historic we talk a lot about Black Wall Street in Tulsa and the massacre that happened there, but our history as humans in general is full of these things, and we get enraged by one, but gosh, there's so many of them, and we try to understand what they are. So I'm going to go out and look into a place called Portverner in Texas, and there was a raid there, and there continues to this day to be border problems there, and without making a political statement, the folks that live there that are trying to have a normal existence are inundated, and the federal government is sort of a crazy partner to have. 1 minute they're against it, 1 minute they're for it, and ultimately they never seem to balance out the sanity when you want to live by the Rio Grande, and it's awfully hard to do. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. I'm also going to, hopefully, if I can set it all up, go out to southeastern Arizona and look into the history of Geronimo, the Apaches, the Buffalo Soldiers, Fort Huachuca, which is where I was trained, a couple other old forts that are no longer there, Apache Pass. All of these things are all out in that quadrant of Arizona, and it's going to be really neat to get a chance to go out and sort of walk around and understand that area, because again, it's part of our history. A lot of conflict between, and I'll just keep this simple, between the Mexicans, the Apaches, and the U.S. service members that were there. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that kind of keeps it simple. So hopefully I'll be able to do that, I think in August. And so just trying to get out more. And I guess that brings me to the scrolling across the screen. We have our ability to support us through PayPal. And what you're supporting when we do that is you're putting me to work, getting me on the road to go look for stories helping me keep the equipment fresh and updated. I mean, believe me, traveling around is hard on equipment, and so I have to replace it quite a bit. And so the money that you guys put in when you guys do your own little subscriptions, it goes to those things. It goes to buying ads. It goes to creating awareness so that we can continue to grow the show. We're at the point where it's not just hard work now, it's a community. And when people say, hey, you should do Patreon, this is my way of doing Patreon. I don't need Patreon to take a portion of the money that you all want to assign to me. Let's cut them out, and we'll just use PayPal. And PayPal charges me, I don't know, a nominal fee. That's like 2.5% or something. So when we do that, that's the way I want to do this. You know, we don't need Patreon to promote somebody else's stuff ahead of mine. They're just not a very good partner, quite honestly. They don't provide any value. So this is the same thing. We're just cutting out the partner who provides the least. It's you, it's me, and our desire to support one another, get me on the road. By the way, if you're interested in having me come out to an area and do something about your area, I'm into it. I'm into trying to figure out where I can get out to. I'd like to get out 6 times a year on the road to go do some shows. And hopefully that doesn't mean 1 or 2. Hopefully it means 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 episodes that'll come out of that time. Obviously I'd like to be on the road even more than that, but we have to build realistically. And what that means right now is just, look, if I can get 1,000 people to kick in $10 a month, I mean, that's enough to put me on the road indefinitely, and then I can go out more than 6 times a year. So that's what we're trying to do, getting a budget together for ads, maintaining equipment, and just paying for gas and hotel accommodations. I'm not going to live lavishly. You know, I like to be rough and I like to be rugged when I'm on the road, but got to have enough of a budget to do it. So that's a great way to support the show. Go to the PayPal link and put that in. I'm going to give this a couple more minutes here to see if Matthew will drop in. And if not, that's fine. We'll reschedule. These things happen. But I'm also curious always to hear what you think. What would you like to see me do? What position or situation would you like to put me in? Let's get me out on the road and go find things out, because it turns out the ground truth is out there. You can go out and start talking to people from an area. We'll get a lot better understanding of what the real problems or what the real stories are. And that's what I would like to try to go do a lot more of. All right. Well, I guess I'm going to wait a couple more seconds here, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Either way, thanks everybody who comes out and checks out the show. I really appreciate it. You know, things like this happen when you do a live show. Is sometimes the guest is busy, has something happen. Who knows? We hope that everybody's okay. But we'll get Matthew on the show again too. We have some really neat guests coming up. We just recently had Sebastian Junger. For those of you guys who know his work, if you don't, he wrote Perfect Storm, which Ron Howard made a movie from. And he's made a bunch of documentaries about combat time in Afghanistan. You probably heard the word Restrepo before. You likely also heard about his book Tribe. Well, his latest book is called Freedom. And him and some of his buddies, this is probably about a little less than 10 years ago, decided to go on a walk. And I say a walk, really like a ruck march, a movement, and on foot from D.C. to Pittsburgh along rail lines. Now, this is not technically legal, but they thought they would go out and do this in what they called high-speed vagrancy, or what Scott Husing called the undercover hobo. You know, so you have this internationally famous author and a bunch of other guys who all have plenty of money, but they decide they want to camp and walk, and so they appear to be vagrants on the road. And Sebastian writes this fantastic book about what freedom is, and it's almost as if you're on this conversation with them as you're all walking. You know, you're moving the weight around on your back, you're trying to get your backpack covered, and you're trying to cover enough miles so that you can get to the next destination, so you can get off your feet and get your camp set up. And it's just really neat thing. And meanwhile, you're going to have these mind-blowing conversations where everybody's putting together these different thoughts that you've got time to sort through because you're walking. And it's just a really neat book. So I highly recommend Sebastian Junger's Freedom. I'm actually also reading, it's not in here, it's in the other room. I'm reading a book about John Browning, and it's sort of a biography of his guns and his life, and it's just fantastic. And the author is going to be on the show soon. We'll have that on, and guess who's joining me? Jim DeFelice, because Jim also is a big fan of the Old West and guns and these kinds of historical elements and what they mean to society. So having Jim on is always great because he has such fantastic questions. If you guys don't know Jim's work, well, where you been? #1 New York Times bestseller. He wrote The Sniper. He wrote a bunch of books, though. He wrote Johnny Walker's book, codenamed Johnny Walker. He's written 2 wonderful World War II memoirs from a guy named Ray, who was a medic who just passed recently. And he I mean, when you read his story, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy went through all this and then lives another 70 years afterwards. He just recently passed. And then also a guy named Henry Longuerre, who jumps into Normandy, and his life is straight out of a video game. You won't believe it. He's only in only in combat from D-Day until about three and a half weeks later when he gets blown up. And in that time, it's impossible. And then he goes to Nazi death camps and manages to escape. And oh my God, his book is called Whatever It Takes. And you have to, if you love at all World War II stories and want to hear like really from the guys who did these things, that book is so good. I highly recommend it. Ray's book is also wonderful. I just can't off the top of my head think of the name of it, but I'll put that in the show note at some point. All right. Well, listen, I'm going to call this. We gave Matthew a few minutes to catch up. Let me check my email to see if he's en route. Just make sure. Okay. Looks like he's having some technical difficulties, which happens. So we'll get that all sorted out and we'll reschedule this for another time. Hey, everybody, honestly, thank you so much. We work hard around here and I know you guys appreciate it and it's good to be appreciated and we'll keep at it and we'll get Matthew on the show again soon. I promise he'll be an interesting guest. And everybody just take care. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.